Forfar, Sportsnet's host, Savannah Hamilton, Sportsnet reporter, Matt Cullen, CBC Sports play-by-play, and Miles Dichter, CBC Sports writer. Yes, give them a round. Oh, I guess this chair is for me. Sorry. Wait, sorry. So ready. Okay. All four of you, welcome. Thank you for speaking to these wonderful students, soon-to-be former students. Let's hear your elevator pitch on how you got into the biz, what you do, and we'll start with you, Ailish.
Okay, I'll start it off strong, I hope. My name's Ailish. I work for Sportsnet as a host on 590 and on the network as well. I guess I got into the business, I guess organically. I was an athlete my whole life. I grew up playing every sport, and then I played professional hockey, so that helped open some doors for me. But I got 2 different university degrees, so I worked my way educationally, making sure I was prepared for the business. And I guess I kind of said yes to every opportunity, and that would be a early on tip. I'm sure you'll hear that a lot, whether it was writing, whether it was content creating, cutting video, things that I didn't think I actually wanted to do. I said yes to a lot of opportunities. I think that made me more desirable as a hire because I wasn't just focused on one single role, which would be on camera or social. I think it helped me be more well-rounded. And I interned my way up. So you start somewhere. Actually, my first job ever, I was a server at Five Guys, burgers and fries. So you can make it. Doesn't matter where you start. And so, yeah, I worked really hard. Education and then also playing really helped for me. So I love the sport. And, yeah, I think still young in my career, so lots of room to grow. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's my elevator pitch. Okay, thanks.
And Savannah?
Yeah, similar to Ailish, I was also an athlete my entire life. I played throughout all 4 years of university. I played basketball. I actually had aspirations of playing pro, but then I completely blew out my knee twice. And so that was off the table after the second time especially. So I was able to really just hone in and focus on media. So I pretty much got a job shadow, which turned into basically an internship that was kind of unofficial because I just kept on showing up and they just kept on having me. Honestly, I was an assistant writer for a NBA talk show called The Hangout on NBA TV Canada. And from there, I kind of worked my way up a little bit to becoming an assistant director, which ended up getting me opportunities actually here at CBC. By the time I graduated, I was an associate director for the news network as well as the local news program. So not even related to sports at the time. I also worked at the Pyeongchang Olympics when I was still in school. I was in, I believe, my second year, and I was just a graphics operator. And then I later became a producer at MLSC, working on some projects that still to this day I'm very proud of, such as the Toronto Maple Leafs, a new series called 3-Course Conversation, which is a lens on diversity and inclusivity. And then also launching Canada's very first WNBA show called Swish inside the WNBA. And then also got into hosting and was a part of the 905 crew alongside Matt here. And then eventually I got the call up to be the Sportsnet reporter for the Raptors. But I'm going to bring it back to what you said. I was a Starbucks barista for a lot of those years.
So working food.
Working food, that's the real key.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Cullen. I work at CBC as a multi-sport play-by-play commentator. Do lots of different things, but that's mainly what I do. Like you, did school first, got a degree in European history and French. That really got me far. So mid-20s was like, what else can I do? And I had a bit of a taste of broadcasting when I was in university. I got to do some women's basketball and some women's hockey. And they're like, we'll pay you $11 an hour to do our U Sports games. And I was like, absolutely. I actually got paid for my first job doing broadcasting, which is not always the case, unfortunately, in our industry. And then, I decided to, mid-20s, make a turn. Went to the College of Sports Media. Any CSMers out there this morning? Yeah, 1, 2 in the back. Way to go, guys. Good job. And then, just ever since then, a lot of hustle, like exactly what they said. Unlike Ailish and Savannah, though, not a high-level athlete. I learned quickly that was not going to work out for me, so I had to try and find another way to be part of the sports industry. So it's writing, it's producing, it's editing, it's commentating, radio, TV, running, being a production assistant, that was a big part of my early years too. So really, anything I could do, anything I could try and get my hands on, that was the plan, and here we are today.
Hey guys, I'm Miles. I'm a senior writer right here at CBC Sports. Again, unlike Ailish and Savannah, I was not an athlete, and I knew that from a very young age. What I didn't know is that I love sports, and for a long time, I sort of wondered what I was going to do with that. I knew I wanted to be in sports somehow. Went to Western for poli-sci. Again, didn't get me very far, but did a semester of exchange in Paris and just wrote a little travel blog about whatever I came across in my travels, and realized I like sports. I like writing. Why don't I write about sports? So I ended up sticking at Western for my master's of journalism and communications. Through there, I got an internship here at CBC. Started out as a casual part-time worker for a couple years, just sort of filling in wherever I could, saying yes wherever I could. Got to work 2 Olympics, 1 Olympics as a casual, and have been here for 3 Olympics now. And yeah, just went from associate producer to senior writer, and here I am.
Way to go.
All right, thank you so much, Savannah. 2 blown out knees. They're strong. You're still on them.
It's the same knee. But yeah, it was pretty bad.
Oh, wow. You got Megan Thee Stallion knees. They're strong.
Totally.
All right, so let's get into it. Our first question is from Kyle Drinan from Humber College. Do we have some Humber College people here? No. Okay, but he asked a question. What common mistakes do you see when people are trying to break into the industry? And I will give this first question to you, Ailish.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. Common mistakes. I feel like I get a lot of this DMs or LinkedIn messages that are just like, hey, I see you work at Sportsnet. Can you get me a job? And I think you're going to hear a lot from panelists today that we really want to help. Like, we're here for a reason. We want to help you. I didn't have a lot of mentors when I was in university, so we certainly want to give you as much as we can, but there's like a proper way about it. And that is if you want help with content, or you want help with like a job shadow, or you want help learning about the ins and outs, or how you got there, what kind of industry you like working in, I think it's better to come with a question or a better approach than that, because we do want to help for sure, just to make that clear. But there's certain ways about it. And then secondly, I would say that whatever you're putting on social media is really important for your brand. I think we're learning that more and more. It's very easy for an employer to be like, oh, I'm going to look up what you're tweeting about, and if it's off-putting or if it's, I guess, against their own media company, or just, I think you just need to be sure of what you're putting yourself out there. Like, be authentic, make your own content, be really proud of that, but whatever's on the internet really doesn't go away. I've seen some people lose job opportunities because of a tweet that, maybe they thought was funny at the time, but it sticks with you. So I would say be just really clear and sure about what you put out there, and always be willing to say yes. Like, if the perfect job doesn't fall on your plate right away, like you're a Sportsnet host out of university, you might have to do something that you feel is beneath you, or something that you don't really want to do because, oh, it's not as glamorous to be behind the screen working on board operations or being the camera operator. Like, you learn so much from those opportunities, and those people help you get to be in front of the camera or the one talking. So say yes to opportunities, learn something from them, and then maybe when you're in the job, hey, I've been here for a couple months. I would love to actually shadow you when you're in front of the camera. How did you get there? Like, what can I do to set myself apart? So nothing is beneath you. It really helps you get to where you're going. We all started somewhere. We did not just get handed this. And just be really clear about who you put on in terms of your face on social, because it's becoming more and more important in our industry, to make sure that that's really you and you want to represent yourself well. So those are some common mistakes.
Anything else to add, Savannah, Matt, Miles?
Honestly, I think you nailed it. Yeah. That was pretty solid. Like, literally, like, your social media speaks volumes. It's the first impression, right, before anybody actually gets to know you. So if they don't know your sense of humor because they haven't ever had a conversation with you, and the first thing they see is like a crude tweet or something that's a little bit off-putting, they're just going to take that as, oh, I don't know about that. Or like, if you're just doing anything that's kind of distasteful on social, like that just, it's like I said, it's your first impression as an employer. So just be sure. And even like for us, like if we want to help you to get to somewhere, we have to make sure that you're not going to make us look bad either. So there's a lot of like layers to exactly what Ailish just said.
That's a great point. Like if someone says, "Oh, I'd love to come and shadow you for a day, but maybe I've seen some tweets or some social media work, doesn't give me a great vibe," I'm going to be more hesitant to say, "Yeah, come along and I'll introduce you to my colleagues." So that's a great point. And I think it really can be. It sounds easy, it sounds really obvious, but like show up with a good attitude, like smile, be energetic, like even just like that presence off the get-go, like that I feel can really go a long way. Like be a yes person, like yes, I can do that. Yes, I can help, especially if you do get an opportunity as an intern or whatever that first job might be.
Yeah, I would say from a writer's perspective, if you're coming in, sorry, Asher.
All good. It's all good. It's all good.
Just really quickly, if you're coming in as a writer, just write clean copy. Your editors don't want to be fixing a ton of grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes and things like that. Like, trust me, there will be a lot of edits to your copy already. Don't add those extra things. Just come in and be an easy person to work with.
Nothing is beneath you, so say yes to curling. I'm kidding. We love Devin Haru. Question number 2 comes from Trevor Alexander, who is a radio producer. And he says, prep work, in my view, is what makes broadcast sound professional. How much time do you commit to preparation when doing a broadcast? And we are going to start with you, Matt.
Well, preparation is really like step one of being a broadcaster. It really depends on what you're doing as well, your role. So time commitments can really vary. But if you're hosting a show, like preparation would be a lot different than sideline or play-by-play or even like researching a story when you're doing some writing. In terms of a play-by-play experience, that's what I probably know most. Like for me, you're talking about an unscripted game. You have really no idea how it could go. The Raptors might win by 40. They might lose by 40. You might have a career high. You might have an amazing shot that might be seen all across the world on social media. So how are you ready for that? Do you have notes on players? Do you have everything you need for every different scenario? And obviously, time commitments can be tricky, but I mean, that's the goal, right? The goal is to have everything covered. So for an average game, I would say like I'm usually like preparing probably somewhere between 4, 6, 8 hours a day, but I've done some Olympics, and that's like weeks of preparation, right? To know hundreds of different athletes. So yeah, but really, that's what I put the most time in my week is preparation.
Can I just give content on like a
Absolutely.
different role? So mine, I was hosting the morning show for the last couple of years, and so it would be live on air at 6 a.m. every day. So I'm getting up around 4:30, but my schedule was really difficult. And you had to grind, but you'd be watching sports all night, taking notes while watching sports. So you're not really like a fan. You're like grinding, writing down as many notes as possible. And the second that I would go to bed, which might be midnight, 1 a.m., I had to be prepared to host a morning show where I'm recapping everything that happened the night before. So it's a way different approach than doing it live. I'm your first voice in the morning of like what you missed if you went to bed or there was like a late night game. So completely different approach. And we'd be interviewing a lot of guests live on the morning show. So prepping questions for guests is really important. You kind of want to leave room for them to answer. So like, oh, let's talk about this storyline. Go ahead. So you have to, prep questions. You have to prep analysis, and you want to come with an energy in the morning that was really difficult. So it's so different. I'm sure Savannah as well, like with her role. Everyone's role is different, but I mean, weird hours. It's hard. Like I was sleeping like 3 hours a night. But you have to put the work in, because the worst thing would be to show up and sound unprepared, to not give the right analysis. People can see right through that. So whether it's really hard hours or it's all day prepping for a nighttime show, it's different in every role. But it makes the biggest difference in feeling you're confident too. Because if you don't sound confident, people are like, I don't want to listen to this, right? So everyone's got a different role of prep, but I can't say how important it was for me. And I leaned on our producer a lot too. Producers are really important, giving stats, giving content, okay, if you missed this was a career night, blah, 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 blah. Like people are really helpful. I didn't do it all myself, but producers were instrumental in making sure that we're ready.
And when it comes to prep, like you have to do a lot of prep work, especially with sports, because things can happen. There's external stories. Sometimes, though, it feels like it can be almost too much, and then you can feel a little bit stunted when you're almost presenting it. So how do you balance that mix of being over-prepared, almost too much, and then you can feel a little bit stunted when you're almost presenting it? So how do you balance that mix of being over-prepared with just enough, and like you said, allowing the interviewee or however you're presenting to let it breathe and for people to get the story?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I'll jump in here because that's a balance that I definitely deal with myself, because there could be games where there's so many storylines going into this. Like, you know, even looking up at this upcoming season, like the Raptors are going to face Houston, right? And then, okay, so what's the big storyline there? Obviously, Fred VanVleet. But what if there's a big key injury happening at the same time? And what if that there's like some other stuff happening within the team, or maybe they're on a 10-game win streak and there's just so many different storylines that are happening at the exact same time. But then there's other games where you just face Washington for the 4th time in like the month or something, or about a month and a half, and there's like, what are we gonna talk about now? Like, so it's an interesting role that I'm in, because at the end of the day, I try to look for a mixture of, one, the most important thing, like the game story, like what is the most important story, and kind of ranking them in my head of what my leads are. So I come with like 4 concrete stories every single game, despite the circumstances. And then I also take a pulse on where are we even in society. Like, is it, International Women's Day? Is it Black History Month? And then like the players, they enjoy talking about some subjects that are personal and close to them, so I'll ask them especially if it's International Women's Day or leading up to it even, because we don't just celebrate women on one day. Hey, who is the biggest role model in your life when it comes to women? And I mean, I asked that to Malachi Flynn, and he told me that his sisters got him into basketball. And so like those are stories that I think are just so key to incorporating in a traditional broadcast too. And so what I do to not overwhelm myself with balance is I just have to make sure that I'm always very, very secure and confident and just know the information inside out. Because if you are confident in the information, it'll just flow out like very naturally. If you're not confident in the information, then you're like, I think that he was inspired by his sisters. Like, no, he was inspired by his sisters, So it's a big difference in that way. So as you mentioned, like confidence is key, and definitely lots of preparation. And I know that for me, I'd say because I go to every practice and every shoot around, and I talk to players pre-game too and post-game, I would say for me, there's probably an average of 8 hours a game, like going into another game.
Amazing. Thank you all for the response. Let's go to question number 3. And this comes from Alex McComb from Western University. What specific action items should aspiring sports journalists focus in their final years of school to get a good job after they graduate? And Miles, you'll take this one.
Thanks for the question, Alex. I think just be there, and as we've said so many times on this panel already, say yes to everything. Like, I'm somebody who has been comfortable on a keyboard but not in front of a camera. But when you're in school, that's the time to test everything out. So if there's a chance to, a group project and somebody has to be the on-cam reporter, say yes to doing that. Create a podcast with your friends in school, whatever. Talk about anything you like. Just get reps, keep going, do it. And then once you're in the industry, or if you're an intern, part-time, whatever, just keep saying yes and be there. One of the passions I picked up sort of during COVID was golf. Obviously, that was like a very easy thing to do during the pandemic. And so, I pitched like going out to Ottawa to see Brooke Henderson compete on home turf last year. And that sort of led into going to the Canadian Open this year. And golf is not something that CBC Sports normally has a big interest in. But, I pitched it. Editor said yes, you're there, and then you see Nick Taylor hit a 72-foot eagle putt in a 4th playoff hole to win. So you just never know what can happen when you're there. So yeah, just say yes and be there.
Anything else to add?
I would say do your best even when you're in school to try and be reaching out to people, or even like try and find some part-time work, or even if there's a small internship that you can do, like almost kind of like have a foot out of school and into the real industry. That was my case. I had a chance to intern at TSN one summer doing some digital work on tsn.ca. And then later on that summer, the Pan American Games came up. That was like my first real job with CBC, 2015 in Toronto. So, and I still had one more year of school to go after that. So I was able to finish that year, but of course, maintain some contacts at TSN, at CBC. And then once I was finished school, you're already kind of a step ahead of some people, right? There was an opportunity to come in 2016, the Rio Olympics, and they knew how I worked, and they said, yeah, you've got some experience, so we'll bring you on. So if you're able to kind of get ahead of a little bit, I would recommend that.
Yeah, don't wait, because I think everybody in their senior year is looking elsewhere. Like I was working full-time, I was a full-time professional hockey player, a full-time student, all in my senior year of my second degree. Like it was nuts. Like, and I probably wasn't healthy in terms of doing too much, but if I didn't do that and like sacrifice some things like going out with my friends to Mickey Finn's or whatever, shout out Mickey Finn's, I would have probably been another year behind, and I'd be looking in the same pool of people looking for the same job. So you might have to sacrifice, but it'll be worth it when you have a job.
Totally, yeah. Like in your senior year, like you should totally have at least one foot into the industry. I remember like my foot came luckily enough like in my second year university, so I was able to get all this experience going into graduation, because you can only play the student card. Hey, I'm just a student, I just really want to learn, for so long. Because when you're recent, then you could maybe play the recent grad card, but that's only going to last like 6 months to a year if you're stretching it. But yeah, and then in terms of what Miles said, I totally agree. Like when I was in school, like there wasn't always an on-air opportunity, so I literally just made my own opportunities. I started a radio show that turned into a YouTube series, and then that's how I got some on-air reps.
Amazing. Don't ask me about writing. I was actually thinking about switching to radio and television at TMU, but there was an entry essay. I typed the word "the," and I'm like, this isn't for me. So, but here I am. Okay, on to question number 4, and this is from Matt Zinuk. I'm sorry, Matt, also from Humber College. What is your biggest tip to help yourself in front of a camera before going live on air? And Savannah, for you?
Yeah, I would say just prep, kind of what we talked about, because there's almost no such thing as too much preparation. Because at the very least you can organize yourself better. Like there's always a better way to structure stories, or to even just have them in a sense that make the most sense to you when you're trying to find them on the fly, because like maybe you weren't expecting kind of like what Matt was saying, like you can't expect somebody like what the type of games they're gonna have or what's gonna happen. So when Fred VanVleet had like a 20-20 game, like with 20 assists and setting a franchise record, I like was flipping through my pages, like looking for like, do I have any stories on Fred and assisting and stuff like that? And like, oh, boom, found it. So as long as you keep really organized, put all that prep work in that we already talked about, then you're gonna set yourself up for success. It's funny though, because as a sideline reporter, like you only use 30% of the stories that you actually got. So 70% will never make the air usually, because I probably have about 3 to 5 hits a game. And you just gotta make those the best that you absolutely can. So yeah, I think it's just being confident and just being really informed and organized.
Take a deep breath before you start, because like if your pace is pretty fast, then you're feeling like, am I nervous? Why am I talking so fast? Where's my next point? Yeah. Like if you just take a deep breath and you know what your like points in terms of segues are. If you have 3 stories you want to get to, okay, it's Fred, then it's Masai, then it's a returning Raptor. It's like, okay, I do this, take a deep breath, because it sounds like you're talking really fast, but people watching it, they don't notice, right? They just like, oh, this is good pace. Sounds good. So take a deep breath, compose yourself, and sometimes I don't know if it helps for you, but like doing it in front of the mirror, seeing yourself, it's like you almost memorize the story when you're saying it. That helped for me, but everyone's different.
Anything else to add?
Yeah, I would say, everyone's different for sure. Definitely when I was getting started, like the easiest thing to do, especially when you're a little bit nervous, that's talk really fast. Just you can feel your body tense up. That's people are going to see that right away when they first look at a broadcast. So that's something I still work on. It's just like, what are we saying? What direction are we going? Maybe I don't have every single word memorized, but do I know the story? Like, am I going to able to tell the story the way I want it to without memorizing, oh, there's, a the and an and, we're going to say this, So that time, if you're really stuck on memorizing your script, like that can really get you, I think, into a lot of trouble, because if you go off track, all of a sudden, how do you get back on track? So really knowing where you're going, but also being relaxed. I think that's something I still am trying to work on every time. How do you be natural in an unnatural environment? Because having a big light on you and talking in front of a camera is not like talking to a friend at a bar, but that's kind of how people want to see you on TV.
No, exactly. I was just gonna say, like, the last thing is, like, on top of these amazing points, you guys are both right in terms of how I go about it too, is also like another thing that relaxes me is just smiling. Like, come in warm, come in with a smile. Like, you're broadcasting, you're working in the candy factory of life. Like, this is supposed to be fun. And just like making sure that, like, and that actually naturally like relaxes you. And then you're in people's living rooms. Like, you're one of them, you're joining the family for the night. So like they want to make sure they have a friendly face like they're talking to or listening to when they're tuning into the game. So just a smile goes a long way.
I would say as someone who's fairly new, definitely newer than my fellow panelists here on air, I would say it is super important to have a structure when you're speaking on air, but don't think about that structure too much. Like, when you're formulating your story ideas, just don't sit down and like just say, I need to say this and then this and then this. Just, it's a conversation. You're talking about sports. You're talking about something you love. If you want to think about ways to formulate those story ideas, do it while you're on a run or at the gym or in the shower. Just like, not like, as Savannah said, just like feeling natural is so hard, but there's ways to do it that help a lot.
Yeah, and I would say when you do make a whoopsies, remember also when you are in conversation, you repeat words, just keep going. Don't get caught up, because you can really super derail yourself and get into your head. I mean, I messed up 2 sentences already on these papers. But let's get to our 5th question. And this comes from David Foote. Also, we have time for this? Yeah, okay, great. I keep getting told I'm doing the right things but not seeing any results. How do I elevate myself and make my work actually get noticed and get professional positions?
Is this for anyone?
Yeah, anyone.
Oh, okay. I've certainly heard this one before, and I feel for you, because the more that we go through graduating classes, the more people that want to work in sports, and I don't blame people. And it's all about setting yourself apart from others, and I think that's just being authentic, but doing something that you like, because it's so different if I'm watching content that you think Sportsnet wants, which is like, I'm going to do the highlights of the Maple Leafs game, and it doesn't sound like you actually enjoy it, but you think that's what Sportsnet wants. But if you're doing something that's your own spin, and you're talking about, I'm going to put Taylor Swift songs with each player on the Maple Leafs, like what fits their vibe, like it's just different, and maybe I see that as a hiring person, or I see that you enjoy putting your own spin on it. Whereas if you're just trying to be, cookie cutter, this is exactly what Sportsnet does, I want to give them this, a lot of people are doing that. So how do you set yourself apart? Find your own niche, find your own vibe, enjoy doing what you're doing, and keep doing it. Consistency is so important. Like, if you want to start a podcast and you do 3 episodes with your friends, you're like, oh, no one's hired me, I'm going to stop. You're going to do way more. You need to do way more. You need to think outside the box. And if you love what you're doing, it comes across so authentically, as Savannah was saying, you're smiling, you're enjoying it. I think that goes a long way than just doing what you think the hiring manager wants or you think is going to go viral. Just be consistent with what you want to do, and then also you're going to enjoy it more, and it's not going to feel like a job. So I would say that would help you get noticed, and it's tough. So I totally understand that this can be frustrating.
And also, I think like reaching out to people in your industry, even when you don't feel like you're perfect or completely polished, and ask for like, hey, can I get your eyes on this? I'm working on this. What do you see? What can I do better here? Because that's actually gonna in turn like put you on the radar. Because like, oh, okay, like I know this person's working on this podcast or this little like the series that is a TikTok series, but it's really interesting, their takes on sports, and okay, like they're not completely like polished yet, but they're on my radar, and maybe I could work with them in the future. Like, just it's all about kind of like doing things ahead of time that you want to do, that you feel confident about. Like, quick example for myself is the way that I actually was able to pitch a WNBA show on NBA TV Canada was I created it myself on my own Instagram story, and then I saved it, and it got like lots of views. I took the analytics and I put it to my boss, and it was the WNBA draft and the top 5 women and who their NBA comparisons stylistically would be on the court. And they're like, whoa, because a lot of people are familiar with NBA players, but not as much, especially upcoming like WNBA draftees. So that was a way to connect the audience. And then that ended up becoming a WNBA draft show the following year. So it's like you just put it on the radar. I wasn't even hired full time or nothing. And then they're a bit more open to seeing it because they have a bit of a demo already.
This is a really good question. It happens to a lot of people. It's happened to me many different times. I'm sure it will happen to me lots down the road as well. And I think you really need to be patient about this question. Like if you reach out to somebody, you've got a great connection, they might really like you, but there just might not be an opening. As you know, sports business is a pretty difficult place right now. There's not a lot of jobs. I would say it's a shrinking industry, which unfortunately it's going the wrong way. There are different trends. Things do go up and down, but it's a long game. So maybe you meet someone once, you have a great connection, and you reach out to them in 6 months or a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like, don't lose touch with that person because you just never know. Maybe in year 4, all of a sudden, they've seen your growth and what you're doing. You've stuck to it. You haven't quit after 3 podcast episodes, and you're right there. So I would say, and also like, make sure you're talking to the right people as well. Like, try and find out the best you can who's making the call. Like, if you see a really interesting opportunity, man, I'd love to do that. How do I get that job? Just finding out the generic, CBC or Bell Media or Rogers Media email and just firing off an email to that person. Chances are it's not really going to go that well. So, and like, you might have to go through several different people. Savannah had a great point. Like, reach out to people. Like, a lot of people in this industry received help when they were younger, like yourselves or most of you. Like, they're super open to giving back. So I think most people in this industry, maybe timing is an issue and maybe people aren't always available. But if you kind of circle back and say, listen, I'd love to chat, love to have a phone call, meet for coffee, whatever that could be, that's a great way to sort of kind of keep things moving forward. And I think always a really good question to ask is there anybody else that you might recommend for someone to reach out to? That way you can always continue the conversation going forward. And again, always kind of have your eyes on who's making the call on this opportunity that you really like, and just sort of see how you can get to that person without just a cold email.
To add to what Matt said, like, you should definitely be asking people in the industry what they think of your work, send them your articles, do whatever. It's also really important to ask just literally anyone, friends, family, what they think, because those are the people that are ultimately going to be your readers, right? And that's who you're writing for. So I think it's important to do that. And then I'll use an athlete cliche here, but just trust the process. Like I know it's not really working out for Philadelphia right now, but if you believe in the work you're doing, then someone else will too, and it'll come.
Thank you so much. I think now we are going to open it up for audience questions. And there is a mic in the corner there. You'll be nicely lit. We can see your beautiful faces. Anyone?
Hi there. Oh my God. Thank you guys so much. This question can be for everyone, but most specifically for Matt. Calling games, I'm interested in doing play-by-play myself. And at CBC, they have U Sports doing some more of the common sports, but a lot of the content here has to do with Olympic sports or stuff that not as many people might see. So what did you do, and how long did it take you to get comfortable calling sports that you might not be so comfortable with?
That's a great question, yes. And it did require some stepping out of my comfort zone. The way I first got in the door at CBC was actually doing some work as a production assistant at the Pan Am Games, and that turned into doing some digital writing. So I was in the building already, but like we mentioned on this panel, I always would sort of reach out. Like, I really enjoy calling games. Like, that's where I'm in my best moments. Like, I think that's my best skill set. I'd really love to do that. So I kept asking the hiring manager, would you mind taking a look at this? Would you mind taking a look at this? It's like, well, we don't have sport, A, B, C, D. But are you open to doing other things? So you know what the answer to that is, right? You have to say yes. You have to say yes right off the bat. And the first time I was ever on air, was CBC was doing the World Championships in aerials skiing with Olympic bronze medalist Deidre Dion. Always remember that. They're like, hey, we have an availability for tomorrow. Somebody's sick. Can you do aerials? And I was like, I do not know the thing. I said it in my head. I do not know the first thing about aerials. Like, I have no idea what they're doing up in the air, but can I learn it in 24 hours or 40 hours? Absolutely. So that was my first shot on the air at CBC. So I hope that helps a little bit, but definitely, there's a lot out there with regards to what's on YouTube and Twitter, and you can find things through the CBC Sports website about different events. Like, listen to people that call them, right? And you can learn a lot that way, and that can open a lot of doors just by saying yes to something you're not really sure about.
And just to your point about sort of getting invested in these sports that you might not know a lot about, I had the same thing when I started here. Like, I didn't know much about curling. I didn't know who Kevin Cooey was or whatever. You just have to sort of buy into who these athletes are as people. It's not about throwing a rock along some ice. It's about knowing who these athletes are and why it's important to Kevin Cooey to go to the Olympics and to win a gold medal and something like that. And once you get to know these athletes, you do stories about them, you talk to them, maybe you're assigned a story that you roll your eyes at first, but you do it and you get to know the athlete and you like it, and then you get invested and you follow them, and it just sort of comes naturally that way.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Kate from Sheridan College. I was just wondering, because I chose the sports in my program, that's the direction I wanted to go. And I was just wondering, how does sports broadcasting or writing differ from other forms of journalism? And this question is for anybody.
Okay, I'll take this one. Because I did my first undergrad not in sports. I was a English and geography double major, and I wanted to do journalism, and I wanted to tell stories about whatever, but I was also an athlete, so I kind of liked sports. But for me, it's very similar to that last point. What is the human interest element? Is it about a struggle? Is it about a triumph? Is it about something that you're going to connect to as a woman or as someone that is like, it's an in, right? And I think for me, journalism covers that in whatever, sport, food, travel. It's something that's going to bring an interest level to you. And then when I tiptoed into sports, it was easier for me because I love sports, but it was the same kind of thing. Like, why would I want to cheer for this athlete or this team or this coach? Is there something that brings it closer to me as a consumer, as a young person? I don't really see that it's that different. I think sports is just like maybe a bit high-paced, a bit more energetic at times than maybe like a lifestyle blog, but I've kind of done both. And I think it's about showing, I guess, your own personality as well in your writing or your journalism. Like if you're fun and witty, or you're serious, or you're you have a good into the audience. I think you can use that in whatever range of storytelling. It's all about, and I know there's a storytelling panel after us, so maybe listen to them too, because I don't, but I think it's really just about the connection that you're going to make, because that's going to have people come back to read your stuff or cover your stuff or wonder, well, what are you writing about next, or what are you covering next? Because I like your angle. It's your angle that's going to make a difference, and everyone will have a unique in, right? So mine was athlete or a woman or whatever it is for you. It'll work as long as you're consistent with it. So that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Hi guys, my name's Mackenzie. I'll open this question up to all of you because I think it relates to each and every one of you here. But Savannah, I want to ask you in particular, because in watching your interviews and from my experience, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed in a good interview is the level of comfortability that you have with these athletes. And I think it really comes through on camera especially. So I wanted to ask all of you, and Savannah, I know I've talked to you before about this. I'm such a big fan of your work, but how do you go about building relationships off camera so that you allow these athletes and yourself to be as authentic as possible on camera?
Yeah, well, great question, and always good to hear from you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just about being authentic and just showing up and talking to them as people. Like, I think it helps, of course, that like I played their sport, so I'm talking their language, when they don't feel like they have to dumb down things for me. They could talk about, yeah, I did a high screen and roll here, elevator screen there, blah, blah, blah. But outside of even just the jargon, sometimes it's as simple as like, hey, how was your day? And literally, like, they'll be like, oh, it was good. How was yours, Savannah? I'm like, yeah, it was good. I had a bit of a rough sleep, but yeah, here we are. And they're like, oh, well, get a better sleep tonight. I'm like, well, I'll try. anyways, let's get to it. So last game you had 20 points. How can you repeat? Like literally, like just like a little bit of banter just before jumping right into it. It's like, so tell me everything. Like, no, it's a little bit of a human element to it that just gets them to open up a lot more, make them comfortable. You know, you start joking around, and sometimes they're like, oh, like your nails today, or like whatever. Like, oh, I like your shoes today. Like, you know, it's like you gotta just like start having fun with it, because like they're just people too. And so I think when you make that connection, you could talk about basketball. You could get into the X's and O's a lot more easily. They're a lot more open. And willing to share, and then that translates to camera, right? And then so I'm comfortable because I know what tone they're gonna give me when I'm interviewing them, you know, after a game when they just had a great game, you know, and it's great for me because especially after a win, whether it's a blowout win or a close win, they're usually pretty happy. So it makes the interview a little bit better. It's not after a loss.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Jackson Davies from Queen's University. I just want to say thank you for the panel. It's been amazing hearing all of your insights and stories. Very interesting stuff. My question is for honestly any one of you, whoever wants to take it. As an avid sports fan who's been following the sports media industry for a while, what brings you joy sort of to the ins and outs of the industry, whether it's the daily work, the prep, that makes you excited to go to work every day?
It's a great question. I think it's just that you never know what's gonna happen on any given day. Like I used this example already, but just you don't know that Nick Taylor and Tommy Fleetwood are gonna be in a 4-hole playoff as he's trying to become the first Canadian man to win on home soil in like over 50 years. And it's just that excitement that you never know what's gonna happen. I think I had like 5 or 6 different leads prepped that day for all the different possibilities, and what makes it exciting is as much as you can prep, and as much as you can get ready for anything, you just never know.
I think just passion for sports. Like it sounds like you got it already. Like if you're watching sports on a daily, weekly basis, like, you know, and that's what you love to be around, then, you know, it should come pretty easy. And like, you know, as you get deeper and deeper into jobs, there's going to be more and more sacrifice and things like that. So it's it's a little bit harder to balance the schedule, I guess. Like we've heard some of the stories here about the 3 hours of sleep and things like that. Like it does really become a grind. So you really got to love it. So, I mean, I think given the fact that all of you are here, you love it already. So that's a great start.
I'll just add one thing. I think connecting with listeners is something that I've really loved because I had a consistent show every morning that people wake up, and something about the morning that people flip on their radio and their TV to like listen to you. I think that brought me so much joy, just knowing that like it's a part of their routine. So if you're a part of their routine every night when the Raptors play, if you're part of the routine when you're recapping and you're adding that human element, that's what really brought me joy. It still does. And yeah, I mean, we're covering sports. The unpredictability and the chaos of it, there's really nothing like that in the world. Like everything is gonna, you wake up, the stocks are up and the stocks are down, like boring. This is not boring. Every day is fun. I'm not a finance girly. So everything is fun and energetic, and sometimes there's like really hard human stories to cover as well, and you get to tiptoe into what it would be like to be a real journalist that doesn't cover sports, and sometimes you have to branch into connecting with the audience about something that's hard or something that's not a sports story about someone getting a triple-double, right? So I think you realize that you bring joy to people, but you bring important news as well. So that has been the best part of my career so far, is like having a listening fan base that likes you as a person too.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, my name's Jordan. I'm from George Brown College. I have 2 questions, one for Savannah and one for Alish. So for Savannah, I'll ask my question first. You mentioned like the importance of like leveraging social media to like build your own brand and whatnot, right? So what advice would you have just in terms of like being able to start that up, in terms of like, you know, getting comfortable with like video editing, that kind of stuff, in terms of like being able to build your brand on social media?
Ooh, that's a great question because it's a ever-evolving one for me as well, actually. I think it's just important to find your voice first and foremost. Like, what do you want to speak about? What are you passionate about? Who are you, you know, as a person? And then you could kind of translate that into your work. I think it's important, like as Alish mentioned, like consistency. So, you know, you can't just like, you know, expect one post every 3 months and to be noticed, basically. You kind of got to do it on a frequent basis, but I think there's also a fine line between becoming an influencer and becoming like a journalist. But it's just about like just having your voice heard in an authentic manner. From there, you know, for me, I post about women's basketball. I post about NBA basketball. I post about Canada basketball. So clearly I'm a basketball girly right over here. But then once in a while, I also have a little bit of an opinion on like hockey and just like following the overall beat of sports. And yeah, for me, like, cause I had a TikTok account that I was like consistently posting on during the pandemic, and it grew significantly actually, but that's because I was posting literally like 2 to 3 times a day. But this is pandemic, guys, I had time. So now I don't do it as much anymore because my life has picked up a bit. But yeah, like with Instagram and Twitter, it's all about the consistency and just really knowing what you want to say and what voice you want to be in this space.
Awesome. And then for Aish, like, can you give me the pronunciation
Yes,
again?
no problem. Ailish.
Ailish. All right. For you, just a bit more of a fun question. I remember on the Sport Fan 590 when the Leafs won the that playoff round against Tampa Bay. You mentioned something about the lipstick. So do you want to just tell everyone here about the story about the blue lipstick?
Yeah, so that's funny. It's a throwback. Yeah, my personality, I try to be as authentic as possible. Like I'm kind of just fun. I hope it comes across that way. I think it just brings a different voice. I'm the youngest person on that radio station. I'm the only female on that radio station. I'm the only one that played professional women's hockey. So I just try to hone into my own voice. And so when the Maple Leafs were going through the first round of the playoffs, I just was like, hey, you know what? If the Leafs win, like, I'm going to wear blue lipstick on the radio. And then it happened, and I did it, and it was fun, and people thought, wow, this is like, you can be a fan, but you can also be a professional, right? Like, and I think it's important to not just be so, well, the Maple Leafs won. Like, it's a big deal for our city. They don't do that much. So I wanted to lean into it. I'm a fan of Toronto sports, but I can also be critical, and I think that's important, too, is like, just because I love the Leafs, when they blow it, I have to say, hey, you blew it, right? Like, I can't tiptoe around it because you want authentic information from me. You don't want to be sugar-coated that they haven't won a cup since 1967. Like, we get it. So how do they get there, right? So I think it was just a fun personal touch that I did, and I think fans really liked that I could be a fan. Like, in the end, we're all fans of sport, and I think if you come across it like so business-minded and so like ratings-driven, it can be off-putting. So thanks for bringing that up. It was really fun. It took me a while to find blue lipstick in the city, not around Halloween, but I hunted it down, and I did it, and I wore it every day on the radio, and hopefully I can do it again this year.
Awesome. Thank you very much, both of
Thank
you.
you. It was actually MAC eyeliner that I found, and it like stained my lips. So yeah, if anyone's got like an influencer lineup for lipstick, hit me up.
Hello, I'm Jacob. I'm an exchange student at the TMU. I have a question, mostly for Matt, I think, about do you have any tips or tricks on how to like practice play-by-play commentary? Because like back in Denmark, I talked to this guy who recruited commentators for the Danish Hockey League, and he was like, yeah, we can maybe look if there's somebody sick or something. But he was also like, it would be nice if you had some experience, but how do I get that?
Great question, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of the right things right off the bat. So that's great, and plus you can speak multiple languages, I imagine, as well. So that can open up a lot of doors as well. Excuse me, my voice is already going. Not great for a play-by-play person. So there's lots of ways you can get practice. And I think that first of all, like the beauty of play-by-play is that you can go to any rink or any basketball court or any soccer pitch, and you can even do it yourself, right? Like you don't need to have, you don't need to go and have official press passes to go to get into the Raptors like Savannah or the Maple Leafs like Ailish. Like you can just go to a local rink and you can have a printout of the roster. You know how many goals somebody scored. Like you can even do play-by-play yourself, and you can even record yourself. Like in my early days, that's what I did as well. So I had a tape, and you can find goal highlights on social media. So sometimes you can match your voice over of what the goal sounds like. So even though if it's it's just sort of you doing it, it's not officially for a network. I really think that those are valuable reps. And it sounds like you have a great situation. If somebody's saying, hey, listen, like we'd love to have you on our list in case someone's sick, like make sure you keep after that, and don't be too persistent, but like reach out from time to time, say, listen, here's a sample of my latest work. I'm getting some reps. I want to keep improving. I'd love to just be on your radar if there's ever a need. So I would, just be around the rinks and be available and always listen back to your own work as well. I always try and do that as much as I can as well. That can really help you for your own personal feedback. It's off to a great start like that.
I want to add one thing. YouTube's so helpful. Like, they have full games up on YouTube, whether it's the league you want to cover or not, or it's just some random league, and you could just record yourself doing it, save it. There's a whole demo for you. And the listening to yourself was the hardest thing for me. I hated it. Like, I don't like to listen to myself because you're really critical. Oh, I said like 3 times, or the question I asked the guest went on and on and on, but that's how you get better. And the more I've done that over the last year of my broadcast career, has made a big difference. So sometimes it's uncomfortable to listen to yourself, but it's really, really worth it.
Great, thank you.
I think it would be really funny if you went to a rink and did like a play-by-play of Timbits hockey. Like, I think that would be absolutely amazing. Ask permission first, but...
Hi, my name is Natasha. I go to Team U as well. I guess my question's for any of you. I feel like there are certain sports in Canada that are not covered as much as like a lot of people would like to see. How do you get people to like get your story or like pitch an idea and be like, this is what I think like the media should cover or like what the media should see? Where do you start? How do you start? How do you get there?
Exactly what you just said. Nobody's covering this story. So let's be first to it. I have a voice that I want to be first on, whether it's Women's Hockey League is coming to Canada, hopefully soon, and it is in the new year. Even if you're not getting paid for it, you should be writing about it. You should be finding stories. The women's hockey players want to tell our stories because nobody would for the last 20 years. So that's the perfect way. No one's covering this this league that just started, or here's a story that I found while doing some research about a junior B team and this player went through this. Like, I think that's the perfect way to start because there's a lot of people that want to write about the Leafs and the Raptors and the Jays, and just because they're the big stories. But if you start somewhere that no one else is talking about, you're already first on it. You get a good relationship with the players. People look for you to be the voice. Like, that's perfect right now for women's hockey. Like, there's like 3 reporters. And if they're not there or they don't have the scoop, then where are you getting your information from? So I think that's actually a great opportunity, and you should capitalize on looking for something different because that leads into something maybe one day the Leafs, but you don't have to go to shoot for the Leafs. Like, there's so many other teams and leagues to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ailish said it really well there. Just that's your pitch, that no one else is covering it. And when you're pitching to specific media organizations, do some research into what kind of stories they cover presently and what sort of their angle is. Like, if it's CBC, what's the Canadian angle? Who's the Canadian to know in that? What's the Canadian city angle? What's the sort of local random? If you're pitching to the Hamilton Spectator, like, who's the Hamilton native that's there? That's a good story. But I think you're on the right track here for sure.
I would say always have a hook to the story. Like, why should we do this? And really be convinced and really be convincing when you do pitch that story. So there could be lots of different things. It could be, yes, nobody else is covering this story. Yes, this is a local athlete that's coming up in a sport that's not really well covered. We could do something great. Or, of course, if there's like a human interest point, like maybe they've gone through a lot in their life, maybe they're coming back from a really serious injury. Maybe it's just a sport that's just off the radar. So really try and come with like that really big hook and almost make it really hard for that hiring manager or for that copy editor to say, no, we're gonna pass on that. Like, really make it tough on them. So that'd be my advice.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for our panelists? Yeah, go ahead.
We have so many people from CMU in here. I love it.
Hi, I'm Peyton Lake. I'm also from TMU. Woo! So, just a lot of us. My question's a little different. It's for all of you. You're all talking about how important it is to get your foot in the door, to take these opportunities. As somebody who is very busy and physically can't get to those opportunities, is there anything you can think of that you can do, not just online, but physically not being to be there? How can you still get a foot in the door?
Okay, well, I guess my first question would be, like, if the priority is getting into the industry, is there a reason that you couldn't be there physically? And And if there is like a really, really valid reason, then I would say the next bet is virtually. And kind of like what we're talking about, like just make your presence known online. Like you could start by tweeting. You could start by having an opinion on a sport that you want to cover. Kind of what we just talked about before, especially if it's a sport that not a whole lot of people cover, but there's still a market for it. If you kind of become that industry voice, that industry leader in it, then boom, you already have an audience. And that's something that I don't think people like recognize enough, that you need to bring value to whatever bigger network or company that you want to work for. Like you need to bring your audience to them so now you're increasing viewership with this market that you already carved out straight to them. And so that's a big one. Like online presence would then be your next best bet if you can't, for some reason, like make it into the door of a studio or like get to meet people in person.
Like just to piggyback on, I forget your name, I'm so sorry. Jacob, who's the exchange student, was just talking about doing play-by-play. Like he can't go to every single game, but he can go on YouTube and cover that. Like if he can't be there physically, there's a lot of opportunities. As terrible as the pandemic was, I think it actually opened up the world of what you can do digitally in terms of connecting with people. I mean, I'm done with Zoom, but I mean, it opened up doors for like people were getting interviews on Zoom. People were having stories told through interviews that they had with an athlete on Zoom. So if you want to connect with a player that isn't in the Toronto area, maybe there's a way to do that digitally. So I think that's actually opened up a lot of opportunities in our world. And the hustle sometimes means sacrifice. And we've all gone through that. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable to have to put things aside that you might want to do. But I would say, like, in the end, you can get to a point where we're comfortable and I have a full-time job and I can make choices in terms of like what I want to do with my free time. But I didn't have a lot of free time for a long time because I was really focused on this career. So I think digitally, being able to be a presence wherever is possible, if you can't be physically, is really important.
Yeah, I actually missed my last ever game as like a TMU athlete. We were in the playoffs playing against York University, and I had to watch my game on a little monitor because I was actually in this building covering the Pyeongchang Olympics. So it was very much like, what do you want to choose? You could choose like your priorities now or like where you want to go in the future. And ultimately, I mean, I ended up landing a really consistent job at CBC after that. So it sucks, but it is what it is.
I find when you're in transit is the best time to think of stories. Like when you're just like on the bus or in the car, just thinking about nothing. So if you're on your way to do these other things, you're busy with these other things in your life, just kind of think about it. And if you have a chance, write an idea down in your notes app, and then that'll sort of take away the time of thinking of an idea when you need it, when you want to sit down and actually do the writing or whatever it is. And it sort of speeds up the whole process. And just, if it's always in the back of your mind, eventually it'll come to the front of your mind quicker.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I gotta bring this down a little bit. I'm Zoha, also from TMU. My question is more for Savannah and Ailish. Being a woman in sport, but also being a colored woman in sport, I knew it was gonna be difficult, but I actually had like a first-hand experience covering my first event. I find that like we're all in a room together, and then there's like the group of men sort of talking about the game or the race or what happened, and then it's kind of just me and some other women in the corner being asked like, can you name the full roster? And why do you like this player? Are you attracted to them or like something
What's
like
their
that?
blood type?
Yeah. No, literally, like how tall are they?
What's
when
their
are they
dad's
born?
middle name?
Seriously. So I was just kind of wondering, like, I know you're supposed to be confident in your work, but sometimes it gets hard when you're sort of being looked down on. So I was just kind of wondering, like, being a woman in sport, how do you sort of navigate that?
I laugh at them. I don't know. Honestly, so it's funny because like coming from a producer background, and actually when I was at MLSE, I specialize in equity, diversity, and inclusion content. And so I created this series called Hold Space. And that's like a term that I still to this day have in my head. Because there are moments when you look around, you're like, holy crap, I'm the only woman in the room. And then you look around again, like, wait, I'm the only person of color in the room. That's crazy. And so it does get a little bit overwhelming. And luckily I have amazing colleagues that personally, like, they haven't really made me feel uncomfortable by asking me these crazy questions. But I also feel like being an athlete, I'm like, okay, and how much playing experience do you have? You know, it's one of those. But like, if you weren't an athlete and you didn't have that, I would just say, like, you're in the room for a reason. And be confident in just that. I would literally be like, oh, yeah, well, guess what? I'm born in this year, so you tell me. Like, honestly, I would just own it. Like, I would just be like, yeah, well, that's something that I don't know. So cool. Like, oh, thanks for the fun fact. I'll keep that in mind for next time. Like, you know, it's almost, I make light out of it, to be quite honest. Like, I'd be like, that's not why I'm here. I'm not getting trivia on, you know, whose parents do what for their hobbies. Like, no, I'm here because I have a story to chase. I have something in mind, and I have an outlet that needs my work. And so I'm needed in this room. That's what I would come in with that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, you deserve to be there. Never feel like you're there to be a placeholder. I'm the only woman in my whole department. I'm the youngest person in my department, and sometimes it sucks because I was talking to Savannah, talk about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, and like I'm like, where's my squad? But at the same time, you should be proud of that. Like, you know, you're paving a way, and sometimes that seems like a sentence to say, but if you're the only person in there, hopefully next year there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, right? And I feel that way when we hire more and more young white boys to come to my work on my show. I'm like, let's get some opportunities for other people that actually deserve it as well. And like, I would say sports is one type of industry sometimes that looks the same all around, and it's hard to work in it as a female. And just be proud that you're in it, and you deserve to be in it, and you are helping somebody else that maybe a year or 2 below you that wants to do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a huge issue with our industry, and we feel it all the time. And I hope that by doing panels like this and by going back to school to talk to industry potential people that want to be in it, don't be discouraged by that, because you can go in there and you can kill it. Like, I'm really proud of what we're doing, and we're just one small section. We work for the same company, but there are so many people at TSN, at CBC, all across this city, all across the country that are not the same looking people, and that's really something we should be proud of. And yeah, like I think hopefully next year, if we get invited back, there's more women and there's more people of color that want to be in this industry, because it shouldn't just be the same as it has been for like the last 50 years. So
also with diversity and stuff, like you get new perspectives, and that alone is valuable. So like, you know, a woman's perspective is going to be just inherently societally different, the way they approach a story probably. And at the same time, if you have a different cultural background, that's going to be adding another layer of richness to a story that probably hasn't been done before, or just another level of creativity in some sense. And so that's valuable too. So just understanding your value and sitting comfortably in the room. I lean back and everything. And to your point, there was one practice with the Raptors where the practice was going really long, and I caught all the guys up on Team Selena versus Haley, okay?
Somebody needs to do it.
Somebody, and they had no idea what was going on. So riddle me that, okay?
Thank you so much.
All right. That we have to wrap now, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. But thank you to our panelists, Ailish, Savannah, Matt, Miles. Hopefully you guys got some great insight, advice, and some actionable steps as you trying to break into the biz in 2023. Thank you guys so much. And you're free to leave the stage, take your bow, whatever you need.
Thank you, everybody. Great questions, and best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You can always message us politely on LinkedIn if you have any questions. I spoke for all of us, but yes, we'd love to help.
Absolutely.
So how do I get a job in sports then?
Hire me.
All right. They're amazing. They're wonderful. We are about to start our second panel of the day, and that is hosted by the wonderful Anastasia Bucsis. She's a 2-time Olympian and the host of CBC Sports podcast, Player's Own Voice, and I believe it's called The Evolution of Storytelling in Sports. Yes.
Green is having a moment right now. Thank you, Asher Hill. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoyed that first brilliant panel. I could listen to you guys talk all the time. I'm like, how do I break into the biz? My name's Anastasia Bucsis. Once upon a time, I was a speed skater. I was really lucky, got to compete in a few Olympic Games. And in the 7th grade, I made my mind up that I wanted to be in sports media. So I'm very lucky now, kid from Calgary, sitting in downtown Toronto, having conversations like this with you folks. Again, this is for you, so no question is too small. No question is silly. Like, you have us, so ask us anything. And with that, we have a great panel breaking not breaking into the biz, sorry, evolution of storytelling. Let's bring in Lindsay Hamilton from TSN, Donovan Bennett from Sportsnet, and Keyshawn Mystery from Uninterrupted Canada. Folks, big time. Donovan? And Keyshawn. I feel like I'm sitting way too far from you. I apologize. Thank you again, guys, for just being here and giving us your time. Again, no question too small, so please let's make this as interactive as possible. We just heard breaking into the business, so let's start there. How did all of you folks get into the business? And then we're talking about evolution of storytelling, so my follow-up is, what was common practice when you got into the biz that you are like, wow, it's really changed since then? So Linz, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I got into the business probably when I was about 13, which feels like a very long time ago now. And I would just say everyone's path in sports broadcasting is very unorthodox. So a lot of my siblings are in medicine or healthcare, and it was very structured. They go to school, then they do the residency, then they go to medical school. That is not how it works in sports broadcasting. Everyone has a unique journey. Mine was, I always loved sports and I loved theater, so I did that as a kid. Got involved in television and the world of TV when I was about 13. And then when I was 17, 18 years old, I got my first job on national TV as the host of the Family Channel. So I did a lot of work in the entertainment world with Disney. And I worked there for 5 years, traveling throughout North America and doing various shows for the Family Channel. Simultaneously, I went to McMaster University, did a double major, and I loved lacrosse, so I played lacrosse there. And it was while I was at Mac, I decided I wanted to start veering into sports broadcasting. So I started a sports radio show, started a TV program for McMaster University students, started pitching and producing various shows to basically anyone who would pick me up. Then I worked at CBC for a little while as a sports reporter with National News Network on the Rio 2016 Olympics, for the Pan Am Games, for Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment with the Toronto Marlies and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I also worked in production a little bit. And it was when I was at CBC that TSN came calling, and I've since been at TSN for 7 years now and have covered some pretty neat events. I did the Men's and Women's World Cup in the past year, do a lot of NHL content, and it allows me to be on panels with superstars like Donovan.
Far from it. So Lindsay chose being in this industry. This industry chose me because I just wasn't good or qualified enough to do anything else.
Not true.
I too was a student athlete at Western, and there wasn't a huge market for 5'9", 170-pound professional Canadian running backs at the time. So I was like, I gotta figure out a way to stay part of a team, stay close to sports, and so broadcasting was it. So luckily, Dwayne Ford, who is a colleague of Lindsay's at TSN, brought me into the score. I interned under him, and they had the national championships in Saskatchewan, and I flew myself out there, paid my way just because I wanted to learn and be around people doing it at the highest level. And the differentiator at that time with me and the rest of my graduating class was showing that initiative. I knew nothing, but I was willing to learn and take the craft seriously. Go back to Western, finish up, and then I started working with Dwayne at the score in closed captioning. It's a job I wouldn't wish my worst enemy, but I was in the building. And slowly but surely I started associate producing, writing some scripts, had so many scripts that they didn't even have enough hosts to be in them, so I started hosting my own content, covering university sports because that's what I knew. That branched out into covering NCAA sports and then professional football, and now I cover a bit of everything. I was at the score. Sportsnet and Rogers purchased the score, and I came over in the merger, and I just haven't really gone away since. So luckily, early in my career, I had to do a little bit of everything. I mentioned the production. I wrote for Sportsnet's website when they first got college sports because I knew about it, then expanded that and became a senior staff writer. Always loved the audio podcast space, and so pitched podcasts, and now I'm hosting both on podcasts but on radio. So it's been a journey of just doing a little bit of everything, trying to find a niche and working on my weaknesses until they become strengths.
And I'm not on air like these two, but I got my career started, with YouTube back in high school. I didn't work a job in high school, but my dad came to me one summer and said, hey, since you're not going to be working, I don't want you to be sitting on the couch playing video games all summer. So do something productive. So I thought, okay, I play hockey. Let me start a YouTube channel. And I started reviewing my hockey equipment. And I would like email companies. Keep in mind, I'm like 15 years old, just emailing companies, being like, hey, can I speak to the marketing department? Can you send me free stuff, essentially? And I got stuff in the mail, started reviewing YouTube or hockey equipment, and that really led me to hopefully pursuing sports in media. I didn't know what I was wanting to do, but went to, I guess it's called TMU now. Any Ryerson, or not Ryerson, TMU sport media students here? Big ups, big ups. But yeah, so I was a part of the, I guess, inaugural class back in 2014, graduated in 2018. And while I was in school, I loved taking photos, graphic design, and video editing as well. And it wasn't until my third year of university that I got my first big break. It was with an internship at TSN. And the way that came about was, if you guys remember, back in 2016, the Blue Jays played in a wild card game. They hit a walk-off home run. I saw a great image come out from, I guess, one of the photographers. They posted online, and I made a quick edit of it and put it on Twitter. I tagged a bunch of companies, Sportsnet, TSN, Bar Down, like all these companies. Put my phone down, and then I pick it back up, all these engagements on this tweet. And it was Bar Down that retweeted it, and it was followed by their social media editor, Dave Cricks, reaching out to me saying, hey, I love your work, see you're a student at TMU, let's talk. And that turned into an internship. I worked my ass off during my third year of university. Like I was in class, like doing graphic design edits. Like don't tell my professors this, but like I was doing that, and that turned into a part-time opportunity in my fourth year of university. And as soon as I graduated, was on board with them, working in the social media department as a graphic designer. Now a lot of people know me for my photography work. But I use graphic design as a way to get me into sports. And being in the social media department, I got to go out to different events like Argos games, TFC games, Raptors games. And usually with social media, you bring either your phone or a simple kind of camera setup, and you shoot video for social. But my thing was, I'm a photographer as well, so I brought my camera, started producing great images while at these events. And I don't want to give myself too much credit, but like within Canada, there was no broadcaster turning around quick live content with really good photography before me. So I want to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back for that. And now Sportsnet, now TSN, they all send out a camera person to kind of turn around images that resonate well on social media. So it's not just the action stuff, it's the fans in the stands, it's what we're talking about today, that storytelling aspect, the stuff that people don't get to see on TV. So I think that's a big reason why that my work has kind of resonated with people, and people kind of gravitate towards it. So since then, worked at TSN, worked at Yahoo Sports. Now I currently work for Uninterrupted Canada. I run all their social media. And apart from that, I'm also an employee of Major League Baseball and the National Hockey League, shooting games for them as a part-time kind of contract.
So you don't
seasonally.
sleep.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, you're busy.
I'm very busy. Yeah.
We're gonna need more than an hour, I think, for this one. Also, reviewing hockey equipment. My first question: are Cooperalls ever gonna come back, buddy?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I hope so.
I don't know if you folks even know what they're pants, like full-length hockey pants. Anyways, bad joke. Let's start. Well, just quickly, you guys all have been in the industry for varying amounts of time. Second question was, what was common practice when you got into the industry, and how has that evolved, would you say? Like the biggest thing that has changed?
I'm going to flip the question and say what wasn't common practice that is so much now intertwined in media, and that would be using social media as a resource and a way to have dialogue with your audiences. As I mentioned, I got started in TV when I was about 13, first national job at 17, 18, so people weren't on social media really at all. Like I vividly remember starting an Instagram account and like, what's this? And popping up a picture on it and seeing a few people comment. Now I constantly am looking at various social media outlets to get a sense of what people are interested in, how they're engaging. People are sending me messages with questions and comments and inquiries about certain stories. And it's such a huge tool to utilize in shaping your stories and finding the angle and understanding what people are interested in. So I'd say I've really noticed a shift in that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say on that social media aspect, early in my career, when social was coming out, social media was just where you put extra stuff. Like, oh, it's not good enough for TV. Oh, we'll just put it on social. We'll just put it online. And now, well, I would argue even back then, but now that's not the case. Social is often the driver. We're using metrics on social to dictate what we do on linear. But I'd also say that the audience has said, my relationship with this content is no different if I'm watching it on my phone, if I'm watching it on a tablet, if I'm watching it, on my big screen TV with surround sound. We might make different choices, but in terms of the quality of production, we expect still a high standard. It might look different. You might be able to get away with shooting stuff with your phone on TikTok if you're as talented as this guy, not if you're me. But certainly, I think social is not just this waste space that no one really cares about. I think it's a real important part of the business. And I think the other thing for me, and as I look out into the audience, and I love that this is the case, and shout out to CBC for putting this on, is I see a lot of diversity among this group, both in age and gender and ethnicity and style and fashion. And I think early on in the business, you had to look a certain way and speak a certain way and think a certain way and talk a certain way, and you had to cover things with no bias. And now I think you really should lean in with your personality. Bring whoever you are to your storytelling. That's, for me, the intrinsic difference between you and everybody else telling that story. Gives you a unique perspective. It will connect with some audience members because they too will be like you. And I think that's opened the door for more people to be able to tell stories, because not everyone was able to fit in that traditional box of who we always saw on TV when we were young. And so now I think the diversity that you have, and it might be, you're great at math, and so maybe you take a stats angle, or you were a medical student before you went into sports, and so you understand injuries in a different way. Whatever that is your intrinsic advantage, and so you shouldn't be afraid of it. You should lean into it and almost use it in a way like your superpower. So I think that's the other big change is be different, be bold, and don't try to be a journalist or a sportscaster. Be yourself, and ultimately you'll be the best journalist or sportscaster you can be.
Yeah, I think when I was in school at sport media, it was very this. I started in 2014. It was very TV focused still in 2014, and that was when, and there was introductions of slowly Facebook Live. What is the future of that? Do people use Facebook Live now? It's more Instagram Live and Twitch and Kick and streaming, that kind of thing. So I think the biggest difference for me is using social as the first thing. Whenever you hear about a news story, where do you go first? You don't turn on the TV, you turn on Twitter or now X, or scroll Instagram, scroll TikTok. It's that's your new Google search now. You go on Twitter to search, you go on TikTok to search. So I think the biggest thing now is there's also no barrier of entry. We all have our phones. There's no excuse being I want to work on TV. I need to know someone or need to meet someone, or kind of wait outside the CBC front door and hope I run into the right person, right? You can DM them on LinkedIn or Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And kind of what Donovan was saying, showing your personality off too. We all have the same kind of barrier to entry. So show off that personality, show people a reason why to connect with you. I think a big reason why people connect with my story as well is because I'm a relatable face to people. I'm from anyone from Brampton here? Yeah, shout out Brampton. But I'm a kid from Brampton. There's nothing to do in Brampton, but there's all these crazy creatives that come out of Brampton, right? Either athletes or artists or musicians or photographers, videographers. So I think just being in that mindset of okay, let me do something and create something. So for me, just putting myself out there, posting my work, And that really got me to where I am today, just putting my work out there. And the worst thing that can happen is, I guess, no one engages with it. But it's a good way for you to kind of use it as a milestone for yourself, being like, oh, 6 months ago, I was doing X, Y, and Z. But now 6 months later, I'm doing cooler stuff, better stuff. I'm more, if you want to be on camera, more confident in myself, more confident in my story, that kind of thing. And it's a good way of kind of tracking your progress too. So I think social media is the media nowadays, and you just got to embrace it too. And I think things with like TikTok and like Instagram Reels now, like storytelling is the real driver behind that. Now you can't really post, like even as a photographer, like you can't just post a carousel of like, let's say shoot a Jays game, post a carousel. Something that would perform better for me on Reels or TikTok is like the story behind it, like the behind the scenes of, oh, how did I set up the shot? Or what settings am I using? Or just like the general BTS, so like an aspiring photographer, videographer out there being like, okay, I have the same equipment or similar equipment, here's the steps that I can do to get similar results kind of thing. So that storytelling aspect is always important, that beginning, middle, and end. We always want to see how something is set up, how it goes on, and what is the end product. And that could be related to being on TV, being a photographer, anything like that.
3 great answers. Everyone touched upon personality. So let's just start there. This is a question from Jacob from TMU. How do I find my own voice in the sports media world? And finding your own voice can sometimes be a buzzword. So any really tangible tips and tricks? Lindsay, let's start with you, and then Donovan.
I'd say it's so important to find your own voice outside of the sports media world and let that transfer through in everything you do. And you've probably heard the term find your why, but I think it goes so much deeper than that. It's taking the time, spending time with yourself, whether that's, thinking during walks or talking to a trusted friend or journaling, whatever works for you, but really narrowing down who you are as a person. And that means identifying your core values, like what is important to you, the characteristics that you want to stand for, what kind of person you want to be remembered as. Because that's going to then transfer over to whatever you do. And it's also going to come into your work in the sports media industry. And I think if you don't know your voice, someone else is going to shape that voice for you. So you need to understand it first, and you take that in to whatever avenue you pursue. And that's not to say you can't be open to new thoughts and ideas and shift and change, but understanding who you are as a person, what values matter to you, is going to make your decision-making process so much easier, because you're not wrestling with every decision that comes your way of, should I do the story this way, or should I say yes to this opportunity, or should I work on this assignment? It's understanding, okay, this is how I want to approach it. This is the angle I want to take. This is me pursuing the truth. This is me asking the right questions. And you're going to feel confident in the work you do and what you put forward and how you treated people around you, because you understand who you are.
Yeah, you pretty much said it all. The only thing I would follow up and say is, one, reps, right? It will become much easier over time, so don't beat yourself up to start. Certainly, I sounded different when I started than I do now, and part of that is because I'm a different person, to your point, when I started than I am now. But you're going to get much more comfortable with your own voice with reps, because at the beginning, for everybody, you hate the sound of your own voice. So get comfortable essentially being uncomfortable with that. You touched on it a bit, but your voice will change based off the story, based off of the platform, based off of the time and what you're looking to communicate. And one of the things I try to do is think, okay, I'm making this story for an audience of one. First and foremost, if I'm consuming this content, what do I need to know? How do I want it presented? And then expand that aperture a little bit and think, well, how do I communicate in my group chats, whether it's with my family or whether it's with my buddies? And what are the information pieces that I want to make sure I pass along? How do I pass it along? And sometimes you get a little shook when you think, man, there's going to be thousands, or in Lindsay's case, millions of people watching what I'm doing, and that could be tough to handle. But really, you're communicating with a bunch of people individually, and so narrowing it down to thinking, okay, if I was telling this story to my brother or my mother or my partner, how would I do it? And you'll do it naturally. You don't overthink how you have a conversation at a dinner party telling a story. Well, that's the voice that you're trying to find when you're essentially broadcasting or telling a story in a professional context.
Yeah, I think when it comes to voice and also like how to brand yourself too as a creative, like you want to be authentic to yourself. Like you want to put on a front of like, oh, I'm this, like a lot of people in photography, especially in the city, like think they're a celebrity when they're taking photos of significant people and all that kind of stuff. And like my thing is like that opportunity can get taken away from you too. So you always want to be authentic with that. Like there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs with your work and how authentic you are to yourself. So just remember that you want to be a relatable person to the other people out there too. Like myself, I started as just an eager person taking photos and wanting advice from other people. So when people communicate to you or you communicate back to them, just be as relatable as possible because yeah, like everyone's story matters and you just want to make sure you're representing yourself correctly because let's say a brand wants to reach out to you and they're not too sure about your character, how like maybe you act on social media and all that kind of stuff. It may be a liability to the company working with you too. So make sure your voice is authentic to yourself because you don't want to pass away opportunities as well. And some opportunities might come about because of your personality and the way you represent yourself too. So I think when it comes to voice, just be yourself. Obviously, as these two were saying, it changes over time. Like me, when I first started, when I started taking photos at let's say 19 or 20, it's very different now. I've learned different things. My perspective has shifted. My take on certain kind of aspects of the industry has shifted as well, and it's important to voice that. So just be yourself, be authentic, and don't change who you are in different settings and scenarios too.
Can I just follow that up for a second? And this is a pet peeve of mine. It kills me. And I see some U Sports athletes, shout out York Track, here, and probably some U Sports broadcasters. And I'll be streaming games, college football games all the time, go Stangs. And the thing that kills me in these young broadcasters, I love the fact that they're getting the reps because that didn't exist when I was in school, is they're trying to be Al Michaels. They're trying to be Rod Smith. You're entirely different. You're going to different places. You're post-game, you're having different drinks than they would. You're driving different cars, listening to different music. So why in this 3 to 4 hour setting would you try to be them? You're doing yourself a disservice trying to be, in many cases, a 60-year-old man. Be yourself. And so it kills me when I listen to young broadcasters and they're saying things like, you don't talk like that. Yeah. And they're trying to pretend to be professional broadcasters because that's all they hear. But ultimately, Al Michaels not trying to be you, so you be you.
And I think so much of that is from the reps. Like it just, the first time you start it, you're probably a little intimidated. So you do try to be someone else and put on a suit and a persona and a voice. And like, okay, I have to do it this way. But then the more reps you do, and it's just a matter of time. It just takes time. It's the same as an athlete doesn't walk onto a pitch or a court and become a superstar overnight. They're putting in the reps each and every day. And that's entirely applicable to broadcasting. You just got to put the reps in until you get comfortable staring down the barrel of a camera. It is not normal at first. It will become normal. Or talking into a microphone on radio for hours. At first, you're like, man, 3 hours is a really long time. And then it's going to fly by like that. And it's putting in those reps and doing it. And just to add on that as well, I think when you find your voice, I think sometimes in sports in particular, people become their job. Your job is not you. It's a reflection of you, and you can love it and be passionate about it and let it flex muscles that are really important to you, but it does not define you. And if your job were to end tomorrow, you are still a voice by yourself. And athletes fall into that trap all the time. They get a career-ending injury, and they need to find themselves, because who are they without their sport? And the sport or your job, it's a representation of you, and it can be a place where you allow so many parts of you to thrive and grow. But if you have that voice, and again, you find those values and you know what's important to you, you will bring that into so many areas into your life and constantly be growing. And that's something that goes back to kind of knowing who you are and leaning into that.
And just to follow
100%.
up on that again, is one of the advantages that you all have is you guys are much closer in age to the athletes that you're going to be covering than, quite frankly, I am at this point. So your ability to connect with them, to relate with them, is powerful. But you can only do that, again, if you're being yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And reps. Just a tangible tip from me. Find someone that you trust. Because if you just ask your mom or your dad, they're going to say you're perfect every single time. Like my mom, I could not do anything wrong. My mother thinks I am brilliant, and promise you I am not. So find someone that you really trust that can kind of consistently check in with you, because those folks are so invaluable. We honestly will need more than an hour to have this. So I'm going to go to the next question. Keyshawn, you said you started on YouTube. So any tips for folks that are kind of starting independently, they might not have a job yet, and what platform would you suggest that they start get those reps on?
I think now TikTok, definitely. It's like a 50-50 split between people that love TikTok or hate TikTok, even like Instagram Reels. But I think that the important part is like documenting your process and like sharing your story too. Like, hey, I'm a beginner photographer, or I'm a beginner videographer, and there are millions of other people going through the same thing as you, and just sharing your process, your experience, things you messed up on. When I started on YouTube, there was no one telling me like, hey, like you should be putting your stuff on YouTube. It was just me as a way of like, okay, I can film this content myself, I edit it, and I just put it out there. And back then, getting 1,000 views on a video meant the world to me. Now when I get 1,000 views on something, I'm like, I could have done better. But that's just all perspective, and that's like you placing benchmarks for yourself as well. But it doesn't matter the platform. You can share it anywhere, whether it's even just through your group chat, right? Like sending your stuff to friends. Like when I first started doing graphic design, I would put my stuff on Facebook, and I would tag all my friends in it and be like, give me feedback, kind of thing. And I used to make wallpapers for my friends for their laptops and all that kind of stuff. So it's great that we have social media now, that we can put out stuff and get live feedback right away. Whereas, let's say on TV, before social media, you don't really know like what people think of you, whether it's positive or negative. Hopefully it's all positive. But getting
It's never all positive.
if they care a lot, it's never positive. But yeah, just putting it out there and being vulnerable with yourself too. I know a lot of photographers won't post for months at a time because A, they don't feel confident in their work, but B, like they're not proud of their work too. And I think it's a very difficult question, like, oh, like, should I put this out? Should I not put this out? Will I get the amount of views I want? Is my audience going to relate to this too? But in a way, if you don't put it out, you're leaving yourself out of conversations. You're leaving yourself out of opportunities. Let's say I'm a client and I want to hire me for a project, but I haven't posted anything in 8 months. They might come on my page and be like, oh, maybe this was just a hobby for them. Maybe they're not doing photography anymore. Let me move on to the next thing. So always be sure like it's not just you looking at your own page too. It's potential people that can hire you. And going back to voice a bit too, it's like, why are they hiring you as well? Is it your style? Is it the way you capture images? Is it the way you kind of make your clients feel? Like, I would rather hire someone that I would go for a coffee or beer with than maybe someone that's a little bit more talented with, because I'm going to be spending a lot more time with them on set. You don't want to make them feel awkward, all that kind of stuff too. So it all comes down to, and like when it comes back to voice, like showing off your personality. Let's say I love a certain artist or I like fashion. This is another way of me relating to my clients, and when I'm on set with them, I can talk to them about X, Y, and Z rather than just, all right, stand right there, let me take your photo, okay, you're done, kind of thing, right? You want to build a relationship with these people, and you want them to rehire you as well, too.
Quickly to add to what Keyshawn said about being someone you want to like grab a beer with and personality and how much that matters. One of my early bosses, that was something they said they specifically looked for in people they were hiring. Not people who were just good at what they do, but someone who you would genuinely want to go grab a coffee or a beer with and just talk sports. Because that, again, back to the authentic voice, knowing who you are, it's letting that shine through in all areas of what you do.
And talking about relationships, we all have them. Lindsay, you have been incredibly busy this year. You were in Qatar and then just Australia for Men's and Women's World Cup. How do you maintain relationships from your perspective, and then also have to have some pretty harsh reporting? I mean, the women unfortunately had a very disappointing World Cup. Like, walk me through that process where you're still being fair, but you're pretty black and white with the reporting.
I think there's a few components of it. One, I think you have to always be trying as best as possible to pursue the truth of a story to the best of your abilities. And that is, don't say something you don't know, don't speculate. If you are referencing a certain story or something that's breaking from another outlet, reference that. In making good relationships with athletes, I think consistency is also key. I think trust is a huge component in this industry. It's also just a big component of life. And I think trust is built by showing up day after day after day. There are athletes I have spoken to a handful of times. The first time, they might be a little more reserved, a little more cold, because they don't know me. We've never met before. You see them the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th time, they know you've done your homework. They know that you're someone you can trust. They know you're going to ask good questions. They know you're coming from an angle where you want to get the story and not lambaste them. So I think that's really important to remember too. And just as well, something someone told me early on is don't say anything on national TV or broadcasting that you probably wouldn't say if the athlete wasn't sitting right beside you. And that means you can fairly criticize their performance. If Donovan had a really bad game, he knows he had a really bad game. So I can come out and say, Donovan didn't have his best game. He probably had the worst performance of his career. These are the stats that back it up. But I'm not taking a personal attack at his character. I'm not saying something that's not true. I'm reporting the facts and the figures. And I think, again, that goes back to who you as a person, and that is your reputation that will speak for itself after years and years and years in the industry, and hopefully you feel proud in that reputation you've built.
Can I just follow that up, and not because that was triggering, and because I felt
I'm
like
sorry. It would never be a bad performance. Always the greatest.
No, but I think the general rule is don't be a dick. Essentially. And so there's multiple ways to say something. You mentioned how would you say something to someone if they're there. Ultimately, I try to remind myself that the people I'm covering are the best people at what they do in the world. And they're better at what they do, quite frankly, than I am at what I do. And we've talked about social media a lot, and there is this urge now to say things and do things because you know it's going to trend. And you know it's going to get clicks. And so that's how people are incentivized. And so you have a lot of hot takes where people do say things that you would never say to someone's face, or not with that same energy. And so you can be critical, but also be empathetical and say, I know this person, if they could do it differently, probably wouldn't make this choice. Or they wanted to do this, but this was the outcome. Let's look at the why and the how, right? In terms of analyzing what went wrong, and not just say, well, they're a bum, or they're a scrub, or they're a bust. And I think you can say the same thing, but the way you say it, I think, goes a long way as well. And so that's the other aspect of being critical, but being fair and being respectful at the same time. Because these athletes that we do cover, number one, once you lose that trust, you rarely get it back. And two, we have to remember, player, coach, GM, they wake up every day thinking about this, thinking about it, wanting to do well, wanting well for themselves. These are just hours of our lives, then we go on to the rest of our life. So respecting everything they put into the craft, I think, is important.
Yeah, and just from a photographer and videographer content perspective, not publishing something that the athlete wouldn't want to see on social media, whether it's an intimate moment, just take a step back and, like Donovan was saying, this could go viral, this could be the number one trending, whatever, video, photo, but just take a second back and be like, why are you there in that moment? You want to build that relationship with athletes, and I've been fortunate enough to build some relationships with some professional athletes over the years, and having them trust me being in the same rooms as them and know that I'm not going to go out and publish something that shouldn't be on the internet, kind of confidential, or just puts them in a bad light as well. You need to have that respect, and when you kind of put the cloud aside and the social media reaction and maybe the followers that could come from a certain photo or video that you publish, just realize that maybe I'm going to burn a bridge with this athlete. Maybe they're going to tell their teammates or the people close to them, oh, don't work with this person because they gave me a bad experience. And I've had some experiences where I'll be on set or working on a project and someone will come shoot BTS or just help out with the shoot, and I go home and I see images already published. And sometimes it's not meant to be published. You got to wait kind of thing, whether it's with a branded client or project. So I think just taking a step back and realize that not everything needs to be put out there. You don't have to be bragging to people all the time too. Like your time will come, whether it is 6 months from now when you actually are allowed to post these things. So just realize that like in the moment, it may be cool to kind of get that reaction. And I've been a victim of it myself, kind of just when I was coming up in photography too, like posting things a little bit too early, but now just taking a step back and realizing that sometimes it's good to wait. The relationships are the most important thing. So the last thing you want to do is be blackballed by a certain athlete, an organization, a team, all that kind of stuff.
And just to quickly add on that, I think you both made such good points. And Donovan, you really hit the nail on the head when you said empathy. It's really important to remember when you're talking to athletes or anyone in the sports industry, because they're just another human too. And Anastasia, we talked a little bit about it before we came out here. I've done numerous interviews with people who are 3-4 feet apart from each other. One just won the game and they're having one of the best moments of their career. And the other just lost, but they have to stand off to the side so that I can do interviews with both of them. It's okay just to acknowledge to the person that lost, I'm really sorry, or I'm even sorry we have to do this interview, or just give them a beat to collect themselves if they want that. And you said, just about respecting people's moments and respecting that they're probably going through a really tough moment. And Christine Sinclair in the third match of the World Cup probably didn't want to be having that interview in that moment. But when you come at it from an empathetic perspective and you treat them like a human with real emotions and it was on the line for them, I really do think that comes through and people pick it up.
It does. And trust is so hard to build. And once it's broken, like you're done. I remember, I'm going back 10 years ago now, but when I skated, there were a few articles where I was like, what? Did I say that? And like, I was never going to talk to that journalist ever again, ever. So 100% trust, very, very important.
Give us some names. We want names.
That's the post show. I'm going to open it up to the audience. I've got more questions, but we want to keep this really interactive. So please let us know. Anyone?
Don't all raise your hand at once, guys.
We've got one down there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zaina. I'm from TMU. My question is mostly for Lindsay, but it could be open to anyone. So just about that last question about like sensitive storytelling. So how do you deal with any sort of backlash or just, athletes who might be upset about how their story was portrayed or third parties being upset?
I think it's definitely important to be open to that feedback. If an athlete or someone ever came to me directly, I think I would take that very seriously and I would take it to heart and I would love to have an open conversation with them and understand where they were coming from. Depending on if it was from someone outside, like a viewer, I kind of live by the mantra, don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. But back to what Anastasia said about finding people whose opinion you trust, as much as sometimes you need your mom and dad to be your biggest cheerleaders and supporters. Simultaneously, it's also important to have people in the industry who you can ask for an honest opinion about of, hey, did I miss the mark on this? Did I come at this from the wrong angle or the wrong approach or the wrong perspective? And I also think that if you do mess up, fess up. Take accountability for your actions. Say, you know what, did that wrong or that wasn't the way it was supposed to be, and then do it differently. But again, hopefully back to that consistency and trust perspective, if you are someone who continually is trying to pursue the truth diligently and as much as they can in all areas, I think hopefully that will shine through in your reputation and the work you bring to the table each and every day.
Yeah, I'll just follow up with that quickly. I have bags underneath my eyes, but it's not because I lose sleep on what athletes might think. It's because I have 2 kids that are maniacs. If you go into projects with that in the back of your head, you can't do your job. It's too hard to do the job in the first place. For me, it's understanding the why and why are they upset. I was critical of a high-profile coach in this country, and he got back to me that he was really upset. And I thought to myself, like, why do you care what I think? at the end of the day. And I was just being honest, given the information that I had. I've been very critical of the NHL in the past. But I've also, when they've got right or when there's a good story to tell, I've told that story as well. And I've had a fine relationship. I think if you, one, show up every day, whether you're covering a team and you're at the ballpark or at the soccer pitch, if you're willing to stand behind it and have that conversation and be there and not just criticizing from behind a computer, that goes a long way. And then if you get yourself, again, empathetically in their shoes and understand why. Sometimes someone's upset not because of what I said, but the fact that what I said got out. And so understanding why they're upset, maybe they have a business or reputation to protect, that will make it easier for you to do your job, which is ultimately tell the truth.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name's Jordan. I'm from George Brown College. It's been often said that working in sports is like working in the candy store, right? It's supposed to be fun and all that, but sometimes there are stories within sport that are bigger than sports. So, like, for example, 3 years ago when the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, that obviously trickled its way into the sports world. Like, there's particularly the example of what happened in the bubble with the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo leading that boycott. So, like, how do you approach, like, telling those kind of stories when they pop up? So, like, that's open to anyone on the panel.
I'll start, I guess. I generally tell a lot of those stories. So that's the lane that I'm often running in. It's just the way that my brain works, where I'm oftentimes less interested in the X's and O's and more interested in how sports intersects with other parts of our culture. And it could be, in that case, race, but it could be gender, sexual orientation, religion, fashion, tech, science. So those are the stories that interest me. I will say, though, that certainly they cannot be fun. There was a period where I was just tired of giving updates on the Colin Kaepernick story. And I would wake up every day knowing I had to write a story about it, knowing that my timelines would be filled with hate. And that's not why I got in the industry. It's not fun in that sense. And also part of the struggle, if I'm being honest, is I knew there were not a lot of people, specifically in our country, who had the either ability, by role, or interest in telling the story. And so if I didn't tell it, maybe nobody would. I think the important thing is, again, understanding why you're telling it, but also your job is just your job. If it's not good to you and additive to you, if you're not passionate about it, or if it takes a whole toll on your mental health, then that's a story that you're well within your rights to tap out on. I think, again, when you're thinking of the audience first, where does this story make sense? Are you leading with it? Is it part of a broadcast? If you're doing a live event, maybe you're not talking about it the entire time, but maybe you're making room for it in an intermission or off the top. Understanding that there is a sports context as to why you're telling it to educate your audience is really important, and that'll change based off of what you're doing. I'm going to tell that story differently than Lindsay would in SportsCenter, and the editorial decisions will be different. And how you tell it will impact you on what that cost is on your time and energy. So it's a lot of what I've done. So I felt comfortable leaning in, but there's a lot of people who, to your point, they got into sports just because they love sports.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. I recognize that was a very difficult question, so I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your insight there.
No worries. It was a good one.
All right, hi guys. I'm McMaster. I'm Mackenzie. I'm from McMaster. My question, I think I'll open up to all of you because I think it applies to what you've all been saying about the importance of creating opportunities for yourself and taking the initiative to make something happen. And Lindsay, what you spoke about really stuck with me in creating Mac Radio, for example. So my question is, what do you think makes a good pitch, and how do you use your own work to kind of showcase what you can offer? What are the main things that you would suggest?
Yeah, I'll start first. I think just believing in yourself first, and also just doing it. I tell this to photographers all the time. Like, if you want to work for a project with Nike or New Balance or with a team, go out and do that, right? Like, if you want to do a shoe photo shoot, go out and shoot a pair of Nike shoes and put together a pitch concept and a deck and a proof of concept and show people that you can produce this. Let's say you want to start a podcast. Go ahead and do it, right? There's no intermediate period of like talking about, I want to do this, do that, do this. Like, the best proof of concept is to actually do it yourself. And like Lindsay, kind of finding an opportunity for yourself to create that radio broadcast station and all that kind of stuff. Find stuff that fits within your niche, but also satisfies you too, right? You don't want to be doing something that you won't love a couple years from now or a few months from now too. So finding that opportunity, finding that space for yourself, finding stuff that doesn't exist and kind of just using that as a way to kind of propel you forward. And if you're producing something that you love, people will resonate with that and gravitate towards you. And that's the pitch in itself.
Mm-hmm. I'd also say, especially when you're at university, it's such a great time in your life to dip your toe into a bunch of different pools, just to figure it out. What do I like about this? What don't I like? Could I potentially see myself doing this for a long time? This was a job I never even knew was a job. Oh, this is something I thought I had no interest in whatsoever, but I actually find it really fascinating. And in university, I found particularly so many people are behind you, willing to support you with those crazy ideas. And sometimes they're probably a little bonkers. Like, hey, I have this great show. And then you watch it blow up and burn. You're like, all right, that wasn't a win. Let's try something else. And that's not to say don't have your eyes set on a specific role or job that you really want to pursue with immense passion. But it's also completely okay to go like this on your path because you'll learn so much along the way. And sometimes those no's teach you as much about what you want the eventual yes to be.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of those no's, go into it with an open mind, right? It might not be the exact idea that you had, but maybe there's something similar that might work. You talked about having examples, one, doing good work, and when people see it, they can believe it. So having good examples to show them that are like and relevant. But I think the other piece we talked about, finding that why, that's twofold. You got to find the why for you and communicate that in terms of why you want to tell the story, why you're the right person to do, whatever the project is. But you also have to find the why for the people on the other side, whether it's a brand, whether it's a broadcaster or a station. Why does it make sense for them? What do they get out of it? What problem are you solving for them? What audience do you believe it's going to find? And I think the other piece is timing, too. It might be a great idea, but the time might not be right now. It might be better, around a different time of year or in a different season or tied to a different sporting event. So figure out the timing and why it makes sense, at that period. Or should you hold that pitch into a point where maybe from a search engine optimization standpoint, that content might find a bigger audience. Those are the types of things you should be thinking about when you're making your pitches.
Yeah. I love that. As much as possible, try to make it a win-win. Like, it's a win for you, and hey, I'm pitching you this opportunity or this new show or this segment. Well, how is it a win for them too? Mm-hmm. And as you say, maybe not the time, maybe it's something down the road, but try to always make it a win-win in so many different areas. And if it's a no, come back again in a year or 6 months later. Show them your updated demo. Show them you've been working on yourself, writing articles, trying different things. Because you're not just sitting there stagnant. You're trying to improve. Or, okay, it's a no now. Is there something you'd recommend I could work on and come back later? Like, show that you have that drive and you want to improve. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, like, when you're pitching to someone, that someone has to pitch it back to their superiors, right? So, like, leave a lasting impression in their mind because their job is also on the line, too. Let's say they hire you and you don't do a good job. Then it's a bad look on them as well. So make sure you're leaving a lasting impression and also, like, give them a reason why they want to advocate for you, fight for you to be on a certain project or on a certain broadcast or hire you for a specific project as well.
And when you're just starting out, like, a lot of opportunities they don't look that sexy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you how many people I work with that started in the, mailroom. And, you just have a good attitude and open mind. That's really been a huge theme in my career, and I'm still finding my way. But yeah, like a lot of those early opportunities, you think, I want to be Lindsay Hamilton immediately. And your story, I can't believe that you started at 13 years old. But yeah, like a lot of them aren't going to be this like, oh my gosh, it's my dream job right away. But if you have a good attitude and open mind, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you guys. That was a perfect answer. I feel like I need to like write at the same time. Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, sir. Thank you so much.
No pressure.
Hi, my name is Jackson Davies from Queen's University. First and foremost, thank you for this panel. A lot of what you said really resonated with me, so thank you. My question's sort of directed towards you, Keyshawn, but Donovan, Lindsay, Anastasia, feel free to chip in. As someone who's still looking to gain sort of exposure in covering sports through socials, whether it be NHL, NFL, etc., in your journey, Keyshawn, when you were creating content, sort of hit many obstacles or any standstills, how did you sort of keep a consistent mindset or make any strategical changes, whether it be marketing your content or changing the content itself to help alleviate that and grow into the sports media industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like realizing that you're not going to be shooting NHL hockey or NBA basketball right off the bat. A big piece of advice for me is like covering your university team or covering the high school teams here, whether it's basketball, hockey, like there is room for that content, and it's a good way of you practicing. Because like once you start shooting the major leagues, you're in the professional stadiums, it's kind of easier. When you're in the smaller gyms, they're badly lit, they're darker, it's not as sexy as you would like it to be, but if you can make that stuff look good, you can make anything look good. And I think a big part of that too is also building relationships with these younger athletes, whether they're in high school, university, because hopefully they go pro one day and you still have that relationship with them too. Like for myself, I have a bunch of relationships with high school athletes coming out of Canada and hopefully aspiring to play in the NCAA, hopefully going to the NBA as well. So just building those relationships, and who here doesn't like a photo of themselves? But like you want like after this event, you guys are probably gonna ask like, "Yo, like where are the photos?" kind of thing. So
Very
like,
good point.
there's always room for content, whether it is something big scale like a TED Talk or like a panel like this. So people love content of themselves, whether they're a high school athlete or MLB and NBA athlete as well. So building those relationships and kind of putting it out there and build like whether it is creating your own platform, like let's say you start a blog or a page, like that's what I did. Like before sports, I also shot music, and that's how I started photography. What I did was I started my own music blog and used that as a way to get access to concerts, and I would email publicists being like, hey, like this is my blog, this is my publication, this is what I'm requesting. And they weren't crazy shows at Scotiabank Arena or the Rogers Centre. It was just local shows in Brampton or downtown Toronto, and getting that access is important, and it's a good measurement of like practicing too, because by the time you reach the big stage, you already know what settings to use, what gear to bring with you, all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a walk in the park by the time you reach there.
Yeah, the only thing I'd follow up with that and saying is you all will have very different paths and journeys. The only thing I can say for sure that you're going to have in common is there's going to be some difficulty. You're going to hear no, there's going to be hurdles. So ultimately the challenge, knowing that going in and preparing yourself for it is, okay, how am I going to attack that hurdle? And understand that that is not a no, end of story, but that is an opportunity for growth, for learning, and quite frankly, to differentiate myself from everyone else who at that point would just stop. And so it's really important, both positively and negatively, to just have a you versus you mindset. Run your own race. Don't worry about who else in your class or in the industry is getting other opportunities. Understand that you're not generally, although maybe some of you are, aren't doing it to be famous. You're doing it to have a long career. This is a building block and a step that's going to be a long journey. So understanding that there will be times where it's difficult, where you hear no or the pitches don't get greenlit. Take that for what it is. All it is information. You apply it to the next opportunity and you attack that hurdle the same way.
And to echo that, I think the commonality amongst people who work in sports and kind of make it to a certain level, they had that drive. It's the same when you talk to Olympians, and there's something they all have in common is they had that drive, and it was showing up day after day after day. Some days you might be 50%, some days you're hitting 90%, but they consistently show up. When they get those no's, they try something else, and they just stuck at it.
But wouldn't you say so many of the people we work with are former athletes at different levels, a very high level, a low level, but they're comfortable with the critical feedback and the failure. And I don't know if, I would say a lot of people who I see are really talented but don't end up making it is because they're not comfortable with failure.
And understanding that the critical feedback has to come from a trusted source, but so long as it is that trusted source, like really listen to it. And then back to Mackenzie's question, come back in a few months, 6 months, a year, and be like, yeah, I took your feedback, I worked on it, and I got better.
And if you need anyone to pump your tires, call my mom. That is the perfect way to finish this panel. I know everyone's going to get ready for some lunch. Lindsay, Donovan, Kishan, thank you so, so much. Evolution of storytelling. I will also say this. Everyone is really easy reached. Social media, our emails, you know, there's a lot of good people in this industry. And so please keep asking those questions. No pun intended. We're journalists. Haha. But really, a lot of people want to see you succeed, and a lot of people are in your corner. So thank you so much. Big shout out to the woman who organized this all. Let's bring her back. Monica Platek. And we are going to say goodbye to our global audience. Thanks so much for tuning in and for all the questions. Monica, take it away.
Thanks. That's it. Thanks, everybody. Woo, let's hear it for them.
Program has ended.